go live, and I'll check on Instagram and LinkedIn to make sure we are live, and then we can get into all of the things. So,
Great. Great.
good evening, everyone. Let me make sure that you can hear us and see us. So I see that you can. We're good on Facebook, except that I need to change it from private to the world because this is a global thing. And
I know.
let's check LinkedIn. All right. And we are on LinkedIn too. So we are good to go. Did you want to share it on your side for LinkedIn? I'm gonna message you.
Thank
How do
you.
I do that? How do I? Hey, how do I do this? I used to know how to do this. Let's do that. So good evening, everyone. We are just getting all the tech stuff out of the way, and then we will proceed on with our conversations this evening. For me and Lindsay, how early is it for you where you are?
Oh, it's fine. It's 7. I'm a morning person, so I've been ready. I've been ready since 6, ready to have a chat. Yeah.
Okay, here you go. So I just sent it to your Lindsay LinkedIn inbox so that you can also send it over. And so this gives everyone a chance to come on in the room and realize that we are live and this is real. So as you're coming on,
Right.
y'all, it's Women's Health Month. So happy Women's Health Month to you all. I want to know whether you're going to join us live or on the replay. I want to know what y'all are doing on Women's Health Month. Like, are we doing the same old, or are we like doing some new things, especially for the midlife baddies over 40, where everything has changed? Okay, here we go. So let me
click on this.
So, what are you ladies doing for Women's Health Month? What's one thing that you have done to honor your holistic health? So, not just physical health. What's one thing that you've done that you probably have not done before? So, hopefully, y'all are leaning in on this Women's Health Month. And so, please comment in the chat. We want to know that you're with us, whether it's on the replay or it is live right now. We want to make sure that you engage with us. And say where you're joining us from. So Lindsay has many people from across the pond in the world. So if y'all are joining us, please also say that in the chat where you're from. So Lindsay, were you able to share it?
I can't get it to share. And I'm not sure why.
Okay,
which I wish I could.
Oh, okay. This tech stuff is just not
a whole nother level. I know it's not cooperating today.
As it oftentimes does not. Oh my goodness. Let me see here. So how would
if I can add this in?
Maybe I can so y'all in the chat, you're joining us. Welcome. I have my friend Lindsay, y'all. Lindsay's joining us from Singapore. She'll tell y'all all about what she's up to over there. But in the meantime, we're trying to work this tech out. So y'all hang on. So let's see. Maybe I can tag you in the post again, and that might work.
Yeah, it's not letting me reshare for some reason. I'm not sure why.
That's terrible. Shame on the tech. Shame on the tech. Okay, so I just um, tagged you on the live broadcast on LinkedIn. So that means,
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I can see it's all coming through. It's just a matter of the reshare.
Okay, I can't repost.
All right, here you
Sure.
are. Now, let me see if I can reshare us.
Okay, very good. So as y'all are joining us this evening, please tell us, what are y'all doing on this Women's Health Month? As we're celebrating Women's Health Month, it is a privilege and an honor to have the autonomy to make decisions for our health and well-being. So what are y'all doing differently, if anything at all? Let me just say it like that.
Okay, Fiona, this is not allowing me to add, so I wonder if we get started in the interest of time.
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll figure out the reshare later.
The reshare we can definitely do. I'm confident we'll figure it out by then.
Okay, well, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. It's 7:10. So, um, Lindsay, how are you? It's been a couple of weeks since we talked and saw, all the synergy. So, what's going on over there in Singapore?
Yeah, it's a great question. Good morning, and I guess good evening, good morning, and all of those other good things, Dr. Fiona. I'm really glad to be on the call with you. And I was saying, I've really missed you. It's like it's only been like a week and a half or 2 weeks since we last chatted, and already I feel like, it's so nice to have the connection back. So it's fun to chat with you. I've loved learning about what you're doing, so I'm excited to talk more about it today. And obviously there's been a lot going on in the past couple of weeks, whether it's, in the news, personal lives, our health, all of these things together. So it's nice to kind of get on a call and actually get to kind of just talk about these things candidly. And I think the number one thing we always talk about with women's health is, how are we normalizing the conversation, and how are we actually having the conversation in public forums and using words that may have been, had a bit more stigma attached or taboo previously, and actually just kind of building the community together. So I think it's fun to be
Right.
on a call like this, and especially the fact that, we're global, right? So,
Yes.
here we are in our different countries on different sides of the world, drinking coffee or drinking wine at the same time and getting to kind of be together, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, the bond of sisterhood, women's health, bringing us together. Absolutely. So, I feel like maybe we should talk about what brought us to this work, right? And please go ahead, and then I'll share what brought me to this work.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny because it was this kind of forum again a couple months ago that you ran
Mhm.
a LinkedIn Live. I found it really interesting and helpful, and I really appreciated the perspective of women at work and how our health is, taken care of at work, and then in turn how that impacts society and our health outside of work. And so I reached out to you, of course, Fiona, and I just said, I love what you're doing. It's really interesting. Just wanted to connect. And then all of a sudden we were back and forth. So I feel like
Yes.
we were meant to be, and all it took was a LinkedIn Live. So how's that for a promotional LinkedIn moment? But it was really great to get in touch and to know that on these social, it's not all evil on social media. There can be some really
Right.
positive stuff as well, like our
Right.
relationship that started online. So
Right. Right.
so reached out to you, and we just started learning about what we were doing. And I shared a bit about FemTech Association Asia that I launched here in Singapore in October of 2021, and have been kind of growing and expanding ever since. And now we have this fantastic kind of specialist advisory and industry network across 10 countries in Asia, with over 80 femtech companies, or female technology, so women's health and tech companies. And some of the countries don't even have companies yet, but we're really encouraging entrepreneurship, education, advocacy, in countries like Bhutan that, are primed and ready and have great healthcare systems. It's just a matter of kind of taking that next level of incorporating entrepreneurship with healthcare. And that's really where we see femtech coming together.
Right, right. Yeah, so I love that origin story for us, right? The way you kind of just reached out, and then we just jumped in a call, and it's like this whole relationship, and we're working on something that we can share later. But Yeah, I love social media for that. It's neutral. Like it can either, it's whatever you make it, right? And we're brilliant women, so we made it something brilliant. I would love to say that. We made
Of
it
course.
something brilliant. We're turning it into an emerging partnership, which I am excited about. For me, in terms of getting to FemTech and getting to women's health, I didn't start out that way. I started out as a dietitian. It was like my first major role in healthcare, and then I got into public health because typically dietetics is, for the most part, it's like a one-on-one kind of thing. Where public health is more like population based and that kind of thing. So I wanted to have an impact on a population level. And then the 40s hit, and all the health and wellness, public health kind of things seemed appropriate, but they now I needed to narrow it into women's health. So as I learned about midlife and health and wellness and the needs of a woman changing, health needs changing, I realized that there was something to it. One of the things that I realized, I didn't even know about FemTech, right? Like, number one, with all of the schooling I've never had a class on women's health, much less women's health in midlife and how different it is, from health in the other parts of lifespan. But the femtech piece was so fascinating. I remember my first femtech event back in New York about 2.5 years ago, and just thinking like, wow, my mind was just totally blown that you could leverage technology at that level to meet the needs of women across the lifespan, right? That where traditional healthcare may not meet the needs or scratch the itch or have the solution, that technology does. And so that was so fascinating for me. So when we connected, I was so excited to see that you had really thought through and created this this ecosystem. Brilliant, brilliant, Lindsay. Wow, amazing, amazing.
Thank you. That's really nice to say. It actually, it's so interesting hearing you speak about kind of your introduction to femtech, because mine was similar. I mean, I hadn't heard the word. Granted, it was kind of just coined in 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
depending upon what you read, by Ida Tin, who's an amazing leader and still such a strong voice and advocate for women's health and the femtech industry. Again, female technology or women's health and technology industry. So, it's always the discussion of, is it its own industry or is it part of health tech? Everyone
Right,
has different
right,
stance on that.
right,
I think it's really important that we call out women's health in particular, because obviously it has been underserved and under-researched and underfunded historically. So I think it is important to call out these things that aren't equitable, right? That there is
right,
a gender health gap. So
right.
I think from that perspective, similarly, I heard the term and someone said, oh, I also work in femtech. And I thought, oh, women in tech. I love that. I'm a big believer in women in tech. And they
Right.
said, no, it's specifically femtech or women's health and technology. Now, we did a research paper last year, launched in June of 2024, and we actually interviewed 1,000 women in 6 different countries in Southeast Asia: Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and I'm missing one, forgive me, Malaysia. No, not Malaysia. There's one. Anyways, the point is 6 countries in Southeast Asia. And we found that only about 26%, 25, 26% of women were familiar with the term femtech. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't understand or know femtech solutions, just equating the industry name with the solutions, that was kind of the gap. And so it's kind of this movement towards kind of highlighting the industry and highlighting the solutions available, bringing those together under one view or one industry view of femtech. So we know that a lot of people are aware of menstrual products. In Southeast Asia, about 46%, or menstrual tracking apps are also a really common solution at about 39% in Southeast Asia. But I think you, again, Fiona, raise a really great point around midlife, menopause, hormonal health, healthy aging. I think these are all really important, and especially looking at how we are starting to move women's health beyond just the reproductive time period,
Right.
which is a big portion of our lives, but certainly not our whole lives. So how are we actually supporting women before and also after? Because obviously our hormonal health impacts us our entire life. So I think it's exciting to think that midlife is becoming not only something we're talking about more and researching more, but actually as consumers demanding more solutions for. So that I've been quite excited about.
Right. I wanted to also talk about the reach of femtech, and we know this, like with other types of technology, we know how it has a power to really reach far and wide, right? With telehealth and rural health and underserved communities, and so that was the other thing that really connected me to femtech before I truly understood the big ecosystem and the innovation behind it. I just thought to myself, like, what would be some of the solutions where we could reach underserved, um, level the playing field in terms of equity. So there's, you mentioned this before. It's like with women's health, there's also a gap, like a gender gap. And then when we talk about race and ethnicity, is also like this gap, right? And so I thought to myself, like, what would be as I'm getting into my own work with midlife, like what would be the one of the best ways to reach um, those who are underserved, those who are in rural communities? And I thought about FemTech before I really truly understood all the options. And I'm glad you mentioned hormone health, but for those of you who don't know FemTech well, it's like tech-enabled women's health. So anything from telehealth platforms to devices that are FDA approved for detecting. I saw one the other day for ovarian cancer, to get hormone tracking, hot flash management, and it could go on and on. And Lindsay, you can go ahead and say some of the innovative things, but I was just truly impressed about the reach, the ability and the potential of the reach to level the playing field, not only with gender, but race and ethnicity, Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that's huge. I mean, and in Southeast Asia, I think we have, similar challenges in that we have, large urban metropolitan areas where, there's access through work, great hospitals, all of these things, but kind of the further out we go, from those big communities. I mean, we can even look at some of our markets. Singapore's small. We're really a condensed island. So you access isn't a problem, right? It's expensive, but it's accessible. And there are a lot of great benefits for Singaporeans to be able to access healthcare at really great rates and really amazing specialist care. Now, if we go to other countries, maybe I'd talk about Indonesia. I mean, you're in Jakarta, which is just this fast-paced, high-tech, super digitally connected. But I think there are about 700 islands, and we imagine all the different languages and all of the different nuances, whether it's, level of education, whether it's access, whether it's the local urgent care unit, whether it's just a nurse or with a doctor as well. There are all these different nuances. And so I think exactly as you say, how do we scale to actually help people? And it doesn't mean we're going to be doing at-home surgery, anytime in the near future. But there are things we can do to help people at home. One example would be a company here in Singapore called Biorhythm, and Biorhythm has created a at-home pregnancy tracking device that helps someone in their home with this device actually track, the health of their pregnancy with some key indicators that normally they would have to go to the hospital for. So I think it's these types of things. And if we just think about someone who lives 3 hours from a hospital, what a huge benefit that can be, that they can track this and talk with their doctor, like you said, online with telehealth. We also see a lot of digital platforms, software. We're seeing companies specifically for menopause, like Hormony, based out of Singapore, which is a great company, that they have 3 times a day saliva testing to check on your hormonal levels so we can actually understand better where we sit throughout the day, where our lulls may be, where, you know, our body may be changing, and
Right.
be able to track this regularly. So I
Right.
think there's a lot of different examples of how this reach can help. And one thing that you mentioned earlier, which I really loved, is you were talking about the one-on-one level of being a dietitian and the question around how do we scale that absolutely expert critical knowledge to help more people. And that's really where FemTech steps in. It's how are the different ways that we can either create a platform or integrate the knowledge of experts like you into these, you know, into different solutions so that more people can gain that amazing knowledge and expertise you have, years of study, and actually apply that to their day-to-day lives, whether that's through a personal wellness plan, whether that's through, you know, even understanding kind of step by step how they should be taking care of their health every year. You know, one final thought on that before handing back to you, Fiona, is I think menopause is really interesting because so many of my friends, or even my, you know, the members in our association, when we talk about life changes with healthcare, we found out about it through friends and talking with friends, or from a doctor that wasn't our OBGYN. You know, an example for me was I was talking with my dermatologist. I said, why all of a sudden is my skin bad? I've never had skin issues. All of a sudden I'm getting breakouts. I've never had this in my life. And she said, oh, yeah, okay, your age, you're probably starting to enter your perimenopausal years. And I thought, okay, how did I not discuss this, you know, with my gyno? Or another friend, actually an amazing founder who started an organization called the Menopause Space, where they do a lot of corporate education, a lot of advocacy work. They're absolutely incredible. And Lisa Tarquini is their founder. And she found out about it because she had cancer. And her, you know, her doctor was sharing with her, these are the options we have. You'll probably go into menopause early. So we need to think about it. So she actually learned about menopause through her diagnosis. So, you know, there's got to be a better way for women to learn about their health than through random interactions with friends or specialist doctors. So I think part of that is what FemTech does as well, is it just gives us trusted spaces where we know the knowledge is valid, you know, and accurate. And that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love everything you're sharing, and it takes me back to the work that I'm doing. You know, right now it's a lot of education, and then there's some all tech enabled education, coaching, and even an online course. Because I want to make sure that education is foundational, right? As you're talking about the men, like we're finding out these. Oh my goodness! I think we all by now, most of us sound like a broken record in midlife. Like, oh, I just found out by the way because something else was going on, and you know, I never had that conversation. And in fact, I did a talk earlier this month for university, and so the audience, the mixed audience, but some are a bit younger, and one asked me what I wish existed that doesn't already exist, and I said to her, I wish that in our schools, so when we start learning about health, whatever it is now, you know, midlife. So I don't know what they're doing now in school, but whatever it is, that the education would be around the body, the whole health span, the whole health span as it relates to women's health. And now as we're having this conversation, even FemTech, right? I'm pretty sure if, and I don't know how many exist, if the STEAM and STEM education programs that we have across the world introduce our young ladies, especially to FemTech, I'm pretty sure we would get some really innovative approaches from them for the challenges they may face, you know, like menstrual cycle and those kind of things, if we expose them to what FemTech really is and the power and the possibility. So somebody, if you're listening and you know, you work with young women, STEAM, STEM, reach out because the possibility for innovation is really endless. And I'd love to see our younger generations actually engage in FemTech.
It's a really good point, actually, and I really appreciate what you say. Also, in our this research paper we did, we found that basically menstrual health, which makes sense. Young women getting their periods, it's important to understand menstruation and the changes in their body, puberty, and STIs. But beyond that, there really wasn't a lot of education. So to imagine we go past those kind of youth years, and all of a sudden we're kind of just on our own. I mean, we really are on our own. So I think you raise a good point around restructuring education. Also, I don't believe in really separate rooms. Fine if that's the culture of the school, but I really think that young men should also learn about women's health, because I say this a lot. It's called women's health, but it's actually societal health. We all have a mother. We all of us do. We all have sisters and cousins and friends, colleagues. So to have really no understanding of that health and how that impacts the brain, the body, the physicality, I think that we need to do better. And I get really excited over here because one trend that we've seen in Southeast Asia, in Singapore in particular, Hong Kong as well, is really that inclusion of women's health in the workplace. Again, I'm talking about this, as you highlighted, as a bit more of a premium offering. So where we're seeing this isn't in every workplace. But I think, it has to start somewhere. And we're seeing it in a lot of the larger MNCs that they're starting to incorporate, whether it's women's health support, fertility benefits, mental health, which I understand is impacts all genders. But the idea that, women especially have a large burden with caregiving. And so how are we supporting women? The fact that often, we don't have that flexibility because we do have so many responsibilities outside of just the workplace. And there is a disproportionate home responsibility on women much of the time, not in every family, but a lot of the time. And so, really women's health isn't just about, is a woman getting her annual exam? It's so much more than that. And then we start looking at not only women's health being about women's actual, women's biology and organs, we actually move into what disproportionately impacts women, like chronic illness or autoimmune disease, what differently impacts women, like a heart attack. So these are all examples of where women's health really goes beyond just literally, the being a woman in our body, but actually into, how things disproportionately and differently impact us. So yeah, I think a big part, maybe for another section here is when we look at what matters or why women aren't more engaged. A lot of times it's a lack of awareness. So here in Southeast Asia, we know it's 42% of women just have a lack of awareness or understanding about FemTech and women's health. So they don't even know where to start. So if we don't give people a baseline to start from, and then to have that open discussion, we know that 52% of women in Southeast Asia fear judgment or shame when talking about it. So being on a call like this, where you and I are talking very openly about women's health, this might feel quite intimidating for some women. And so how do we give, it's beyond just the policy, and it's in the workplace.
Right. I love, man, you are speaking my language. Oh, goodness gracious.
That's how we get along.
That workplace piece I love. I wrapped up a series a couple of weeks ago about power moves. I call it power moves or power shifts. Really encouraging us as women to think about our well-being and the impact of it on our leadership. We are powerful. We're brilliant. We bring a lot to the table. We help create companies. We help grow and scale companies. We are alongside in partnership with men, all genders, right? But oftentimes, while we're doing all these things, as you already mentioned, there's a caregiving concern. There's the other things that go along that impact our well-being, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, not just physical. And so the idea that well-being needs to be front and center for us to take that personal initiative, and then the advocacy piece to remember how impactful it is, how we're going to show up or not show up, in our leadership if our well-being is not nurtured and taken seriously, first by us, and then advocacy at work. And one of the things I love to do, and it's in in a module in the course I created, like navigating the workplace when you're in transition into menopause, and some of the advocacy things, and even some of the conversations, right? Because sometimes we, as you said, we oftentimes may not be aware, and then we don't have the words, we don't have the language, we don't know how to speak to our bosses or you know, whomever, our team members, about, you know, forgetting in the middle of a sentence and what that really means in a meeting, and it's embarrassing. And this is, you know, specifically to menopause, but still, like, all throughout it, it could be PCOS, it could be um you know, the caregiving thing. I'm taking care of my aging parents, and I'm also to have, you know, a teenager or a tween or whatever the case is, and just being able to recognize those things. Number one, feeling comfortable enough, as you said, to have a conversation, but also then being able to find feeling safe to find solutions, or knowing that there are resources available, and in this case, you know, tech enabled ones, you know, fantastic. And I applaud, I just want to applaud the companies who are really taking women's well-being, health and well-being seriously, to the point that they're offering services without stigma, and they're making sure they address the stigma piece. So whoever y'all are out there as an organization, and you've taken up this cause as not as an equity thing, but just because it's the right thing to do, it's the human thing to do. I do want to applaud you. Yeah, yeah.
That's such, I love that you just said that, because I think often we, you know, I mean, it's like double duty as a founder in women's health, because, you know, unlike looking at like a FemTech, everyone has some idea. We all use a credit card, or we use online shopping, or we use, you know, or our phones for transactions. So I think there are a few more touch points.
Right.
The education we have in women's health, you know, so many of the founders really do need to address that. And so a big part of their time is spent building content, validating content, you know, vetting content, more so I'd say than a lot of other industries need to, because obviously there's a big part of it here, which is around credibility and trust. So, you know, there is a lot of that. So we do find that it is a large portion of time as a founder that's spent educating the client that in turn you're going to sell to. And that's a really interesting dynamic, I think, that maybe doesn't exist in as many industries. You know, at the end of the day, if we're using an Uber, a Lyft, a Gojek, you know, Grab, any of these, we know how they work, right? It's a bit more intuitive. But with women's health, often we have to search it out, because we don't even like, most people, you know, it takes them 5 to 7 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis or PCOS. And so imagine, like, if you don't even know what you have, how do you know what to search for? If you don't know the questions to ask, or who to, you know, or if you have a, you know, I've had fabulous doctors, but I definitely know of women who have been dismissed by their doctors, or said, oh, you're just anxious, it's just stress. And it's like, well, it feels like more than that. This doesn't feel like my usual stress levels, you know? And I think what's really interesting too, kind of skipping a little bit, is looking at what countries around the world are doing and some of the shifts that we're seeing. An example would be in Spain, where we see that, you know, it is, you know, by law that women have, I think this passed, so forgive me if it hasn't passed yet. Maybe it's just been a discussion. So before I get too far into that, but one of the proposals was 3 days from home, or as sick day, if you want to call it that, but really menstrual leave days, because some women do have really horrendous, you know, periods or experiences through their menstrual cycles. It's looking at kind of single parents, or women who are having a baby on their own, get to take the full leave period that usually would be split between two parents, can all go to one parent. So it's these little changes and shifts that actually are going to have major impact. And then to your point, as a company, you know, we see Cigna has partnered with Carrot Fertility to offer fertility benefits to employees. And I just think, how brilliant is that? Because it's already traumatic enough if one is struggling to get pregnant. So to add, that you're carrying this with you to work without the support, that's really difficult. I read an article in Harvard Business Review, and it was a couple years ago, and it said that women who are menopausal in leadership positions, who actually kind of share it with their team, are more likely to be thought of as leaders, as opposed to women who demonstrate some symptoms but never call it out as so it's almost like you're introducing your team to it and saying, this is where I am in my health, actually can build credibility, but not, and just going through this experience alone and holding it to oneself can actually, make one seem like less of a leader, which I find these nuances just absolutely fascinating. So it's beyond the policy and into action. And how do we as companies, especially, senior women, which it's already hard to become a senior woman in many industries, how are those women using their voice to support other women who are on their way up in the workforce? So I just talked about like 5 different topics, but that's just where my mind is going. That's what
I love it. I love
I'm
it.
talking about government policy. I'm talking about workplace action, senior leadership. I mean, you name it, I'm going to talk about it. So, yeah, those are just some of the things that you inspired me to raise.
I love it. You gave some really, really good case studies across, different scenarios as it relates to women's health. That's exactly spot on with the case studies. Love it. So you mentioned a couple of times, and I am curious. You've shared it with me, but I think people who are listening who are not familiar with your work may want to hear more about the FemTech Association of Asia. And also learn more about what you are doing and why it's important, right? Because you didn't just decide you were just going to do this for your good looks.
Right. Exactly. So I launched, as I mentioned, in October of 2021. The whole idea was that I had moved to Singapore. I've always sat on boards of different organizations in London previous to this. I'm British American, and in the US as well. So I thought, okay, well, I'm a consultant by day. I like Superwoman, right? Like consultant by day, FemTech by night. And so I was just kind of looking to get into a new industry, to understand tech better. So my background's in the luxury space, which isn't necessarily aligned with women's health until you get into the customer service side. Then actually the customer experience needs that high touch level of service, which is really interesting. Right?
Yes.
So anyway, so moved over here, found that there wasn't an organization to get involved with that kind of brought together FemTech, launched it because I just reached out to a bunch of founders, a bunch of investors, media. Every single person wrote back to me, Fiona, which is just unheard of. I mean, every single person, and said, are you starting an association? Are you starting an industry body? And I was like, okay, yes. So I feel like maybe the suggestion came and launched it. And it's been growing ever since. And I think it's because there hasn't been another industry body like ours at this level, kind of bringing together the ecosystem or growing this ecosystem. So we launched in Singapore, where I am based. And since that time have expanded into 9 other countries. So we're in 10 countries now, which is really exciting. And what does it mean to be in 10 different countries? First of all, there are FemTech companies in all these different countries, except again, Bhutan, which is growing. So very exciting. We just launched in Bhutan in November of 2024. But all of these different markets do have FemTech solutions. So it's really, how do we support these ecosystems with growth? So we do that through 4 different pillars. So our pillars are thought leadership, programming, amplification, and community building. So we talk about thought leadership. We're talking about research. We're talking about sharing what's happening in the industry in Asia, whether that be news and announcements, whether that be research papers that, I've mentioned our partnership with Milu Research last year, that we did a large scale event of 6,000 surveys across 6 countries. It can be white papers, small surveys that we launch. So there's just a lot of different ways of sharing that. We have a blog on our website, femtechassociation.com. And we just talk about what's happening in the industry, but specific to our geography. We really do focus on our region. And I would never claim to be an expert in FemTech. I would never claim to be an expert in global FemTech. But what I'm doing is building the community and the ecosystem. So that's my mission, is to drive the collaboration that's going to make change. The second thing after thought leadership is programming. So we run a lot of events, even if I consider this an event, right? It's getting out there, talking with people, providing opportunities to sit on panels, providing opportunities to share knowledge in public forums, whether it be conferences like the Milken Institute, or one-on-one fireside chats, which is what we're doing now,
Right.
virtual or in person. So it's all the different opportunities we have to raise the profile of FemTech in different communities, whether that's the clinical community, whether that's the government community, whether that's consumer community, any community. Next up, we have amplification, which is working with journalists, the media, to really make sure that we are accurately and as much as possible promoting FemTech, the founders, the solutions, products and services, the community that we're building, different countries, putting them in the spotlight. Again, building opportunities for visibility and amplifying the mission and the vision we have for available, accessible, and affordable healthcare for all women in Asia. And then finally, community building, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's finding ways of connecting the ecosystem, not only to our organization, but then in turn to each other, to actually listen to what people need and say, okay, I know that this organization's fundraising, they're looking for angel investors. How can we make that connection? Or they're interested in finding, someone to help with presentations, even as simple as kind of graphic design and PowerPoint. How can we help find freelancers who can fulfill that? So it's really around that connectivity that we, have our foundation. And ultimately, that's our goal, is to really help our entrepreneurs as our core audience succeed. So that's what we're continuing to build. I think when we think about growth, it will come from those pillars. It will come from more overseas founders moving into Asia, given that we are half the world's population over here and growing rapidly with a really fantastic healthcare system that really can be supported through women's health tech solutions. So that's just a small overview of what we work on. But Fiona, what do you envision? I mean, I'd love to learn more about what's happening in, Southeast USA instead of Southeast Asia. I'd love to hear about what's happening over there in the FemTech space and learning a little bit more about, what your vision is and what you'd love to achieve.
Right. I'm so glad you asked, because we've been chatting behind the scenes. So for me, my vision is to establish a Deep South FemTech Association. So besides women's health, the Deep South tends to be, and I'm speaking very generally, but from a public health standpoint, historically has been the place where we see some of the health disparities, right? Some of the gaps in care in terms of access and even prevalence and incidence of certain illnesses. I really have a passion for bringing and bridging the tech and access and the needs. So I feel like there's a great need. I feel like the tech is here. Like people are, I've had some conversations with people who do have founders who do have companies with solutions. As often as it is, maybe in your world and just in the world, we oftentimes work in silos, and that's like a public health thing also, right? There's not necessarily this great ecosystem connection between clinicians, the medical community, with CPG, so I'm envisioning bringing us together, especially being the equity piece and the access piece and the rural piece and the underserved piece. There are lots of rural healthcare needs for the rural community as well. And so I think the South has everything that it needs. Me being, for those of you who do not know, I'm here in Atlanta, and I've lived in Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, yes, and visited the other parts of the Deep South. When I was in Mississippi, I even spent some time in the Mississippi Delta. A beautiful state, beautiful people, lots of health needs, just as in other parts of the Deep South. So the Deep South has what it needs in terms of FemTech. I think we just need to all come together and start talking. Pretty much what you have created. That's one of the reasons why I asked you to serve, ask you to have the honor of serving as an advisor to pretty much replicate and help me and help us as I start reaching out to founders to do the same thing. So if you're watching, and if this is the only part you catch, and either you're a founder of some sort of product or service that falls into the women's health, whether it's tech enabled or not, we can make it tech enabled because that's the beauty of technology. Or you know someone, please reach out to me because I'd love to start connecting the pieces and reaching out to get our founding members for the Deep South FemTech Association. And in fact, I do have an in-person event here in Atlanta. So it's Baddies Over 40 Unite. And just in case folks don't know what a baddie is, it's a woman who believes she's bold, authentic, dynamic, determined, inspiring, and empowering. So if you think you're any one of that or all of it, then you're considered a baddie over 40 if you're over 40. So we're going to be having a women's health event here in Atlanta, October 17th, the day before World Menopause Day. And so I want to make sure that that's a place where we can meet in terms of FemTech founders, investors, anyone who wants to be part of that ecosystem and wants to be part of the Deep South FemTech Association. So please reach out. And if I don't hear from you and I know that you could be part of this, I will be reaching out to you. So just, I'm not shy, so stay tuned. But I am so excited, Lindsay. First of all, again, congratulations on the amazing work. It's been 4 years. And you and your colleagues have done so much. I am so inspired to the point where I had no idea that I was going to be doing a FemTech association and try to, work to pull that together. But in speaking to you, I was so inspired. I remembered the need and thought that would be a good way to reach out and do that.
Well, I'm super excited. I'm so excited, that you're doing this. And I think it takes a really baddie leader, as we say. It takes a really, no, it really does take a strong leader, someone with a lot of grit and resilience, persistence, the drive, the patience, because it's a tough industry, as we know. It is a tough industry. I think we have a lot of cultural challenges. I think we have a lot of financial and funding challenges. I think we do have, as you mentioned, disparity challenges. And so I think we have a lot of work to do. And what it really takes is leaders like you who are incredibly, thoughtful, inclusive, driven, and are willing to kind of go beyond what's even in the scope. I mean, Fiona, you've done everything. Like I've talked to you. I mean, you have literally done everything. So to choose this as one of your avenues that you're going to focus your time and attention, the community is so lucky to have you. And I know this from personal experience. It's not easy and it's a lot of work.
Yes.
But what has come back and the value that it brings is huge. And I know that there are going to be a ton of founders who will be inspired and will be so excited to have peer-to-peer mentorship or mentorship in your expertise and how do they integrate nutrition and health and higher level education and content, that you'll have that expertise. So I think it's super exciting. I'm completely excited and honored to be a part of your journey. And I'm so excited to contribute however I can and hopefully get back to Atlanta soon. And I really feel like this is such a pivotal moment for FemTech with you leading this across, multiple states. And for connectivity or for reference, I know that there is a lovely woman named Lisbeth in Miami who's looking to start a FemTech in Miami. There's a wonderful Dr. Mitzi out in Arizona who's starting a FemTech Arizona. So I think the US, we're starting to see some of these state-run FemTech organizations pop up. And just to imagine all of you coming together and building this amazing nationwide FemTech community, that is absolutely incredible. And I would love to, I'm sure I'm going to learn from you as well as I continue to build over here in Asia. It's really exciting. So I'm just, I admire your grit and your determination. And I think it's going to be hugely impactful and valuable to have you leading the charge of FemTech and women's health, especially through an entrepreneurial lens.
Right. I received that, Lindsay, because it's been 8 years. And so, yes, and I have done, I've done it all. I can do a master class and doing it all. And I was having a conversation, and this is a little bit off, but having a conversation with a friend on Friday, and we were talking about success and failure. So, I would ask as we're wrapping it up, if you could give us a few personal gems or gems for entrepreneurs, gems for those who are founders, and you understanding. If we had more time, we could talk about the funding challenges in FemTech. It's wild, and how creative you have to be. But just thinking about the challenges and not even counting your quote unquote failures as a failure, because in some way, if you're creative enough, that failure will actually be a success at some point, if not in the moment. I was having a conversation. I mentioned to you that one of the things that I am also doing is learning about growing and scaling my business through acquisitions and private equity consulting. That's something I'm getting into now that I'd love to introduce in our FemTech Association when it's up and running. That, as you mentioned, if whatever the community needs, how can we create joint ventures and exchange of resources and ideas to actually make sure that everybody wins, because the hardest thing to do, I want to say one of the easiest things after overcoming the mindset challenge of should I launch, should I not launch, is this too big, all the things you want to talk yourself out of, and you actually launch. But then what do you do after you launch? Like, how do you scale and grow by yourself when you're in day in and day out trying to do the grind on your own? And even when you reach out to others, it's still your business. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing the synergies and the connections, and seeing how other people, how businesses will actually grow by being part of it, because they finally found the missing piece. And it doesn't have to always be money. It can be something else, right? So I want to leave those, I said a lot, and I want to leave those as some insight or some things to think about as we are growing and scaling our businesses, whether it's FemTech or not, but in particular with the FemTech piece. But I also love for you to share some nuggets, some insights, just to encourage and inspire those who are watching.
Great. That is a big question. And I would say the first thing is that yes, FemTech and women's health has impact. Yes, it supports people. Yes, it's inclusive. It's all of these things. The most important thing, though, is that we're commercial. We need to build businesses that generate revenue. And why is that so important? One, for the individual or co-founders or whomever that senior team is, that the business is sustainable. We can help more people, the better our businesses go. So the first thing is, I would say, be strong in your commercial planning. Don't be ashamed of wanting to make money. Like, the whole goal is that we become financially, sustainable. And again, a friend of mine, Rashmi, she's amazing. She always says what matters to gender equity is your health and your wealth. So let's get the wealth going, and we can, and get the health going. So first of all, be commercial. Go into it with a commercial mindset. This is not, a charitable initiative, though of course you could run charitable initiatives into your business and have that be a part of it, as we should, right? Social responsibility, social impact, very important. But we are commercial. We are business leaders. The second thing I'd say is create a network now. And by that, I don't just mean in the FemTech and women's health space. Start meeting with angel investors, start meeting with VCs, start meeting with people in other industries who are CPG experts or product experts or tech experts. Really make sure you're expanding your network beyond just what FemTech is. As a matter of fact, your most important learnings will most likely come from people in other industries. and learn from the failures of others or from the challenges of others or the successes of others. So the second thing I'd say is network, network, network. The third thing I would say is be prepared for a lot of pivots, a lot of action, and have that resilience to hear the word no and carry on, but also to hear the word no and think, is that a no that I can pivot? Can I change my business? Because that's really actually a great piece of advice that I've received. But really trust yourself the most. What a lot of us, here in Southeast Asia, 83% of us are female founders in our organization.
Wow.
So we do have a number of men, which is great because men need to be a part of this discussion. But with that in mind, we as women know what it's like to be a woman. We know what it's like to have, or women with those with women's healthcare needs. Excuse me, I want to make sure I'm being very clear.
Yes.
So with that in mind, we know our challenges, so we are best placed to solve those challenges. So making sure we trust ourselves as leaders. So I think those are just three really quick things I think about. One, being commercial. Two, diverse and expansive network, not just in our state, also geographically, connect with me, connect with Fiona, like build that network globally. And then finally, be prepared for a lot of pivoting and a lot of action because, business is not linear. It's often has a lot of challenges that we don't see, we don't expect, but just knowing yourself, you can solve it all, right? The only people who are astrophysicists are astrophysicists, but, or brain surgeons are brain surgeons. But most things we are all fully capable of addressing and handling, and have that confidence in yourself that you can do it. So I really believe in women leaders, and I believe in women's leadership, and I believe in those who are contributing towards the advancement of women, especially in healthcare, that has such dramatic implications on our wealth, our health, societal health, caregiving, our families, our communities. So a little bit of a rant at the end there, but it's because I believe so passionately in supporting women and other women that, fundamentally, I think the best way to do that is through commercial entrepreneurship in the women's health space.
Absolutely. I love it. Money. Let's not be shy about it. It makes everything work. And if you want to find out where the power is, follow the money. Money. Let's not be shy. And I couldn't add to that except culturally sometimes, because I've been in many places and lived many lives. In some cultures that I've been a part of, money just seems to not be a thing. So then we have broke business owners or bankrupt business owners. So what Lindsay is saying, we're not doing that. That's not business. we don't do that. No. In fact, like, have no money, healthcare. There's no healthcare really either. Struggle for healthcare, and we could go down that rabbit hole. Is a big hole, So I love your three gems and nuggets. Lindsay, oh my gosh, this was so good.
I know, Fiona, we could chat for hours. But certainly everyone's not going to for hours. But we could talk for hours. But I'm super excited. Congratulations on the new community you're building. I'm so excited to be a part of it. I'm so excited to be there in person, hopefully soon, and see you, whether it's this summer or this autumn when I'm visiting the U.S. It'd just be great to connect. And I'm really grateful for everyone who joined this LinkedIn Live. And I hope everyone found something helpful or useful or inspiring or comedic. Who knows? Whatever it is. But I hope you enjoyed the time, and thank you so much for joining us. And Fiona, thank you for hosting me and hosting this.
Absolutely. And thank you for yours. Thank you for the inspiration, the sisterhood. I want to say something as we're wrapping up. Lindsay has been so supportive. So from the number one, she's the one who reached out back in February, I believe it was. Number two, when we had a conversation and she saw the vision of how to help me bring together some of the pieces, if not all of the pieces of what I've been working on for several years now. But what I really like about you, besides you just being a brilliant visionary founder, is your generous spirit. Like, Lindsay has shared all of her resources, right? So she is one of those people who is not going to say, go figure it out, or this is what you should do. Like, Lindsay's invested, and I'm thanking you. Like, I wish I could when we meet, you're gonna get a you're gonna get a biggest hug. You're gonna, like big old hug because you've been so. I'm just so moved by how invested and generous you've been with your resources, with your knowledge. So I say all that to say, number one, thank you. And number two, that you're not, so people know that you're not just saying stuff. This is not fluff. This is actually who Lindsay is, right? So thank you so much, y'all, for joining us this evening. Reach out to either one of us if there's something we said that resonated, you'd like to work with us. And we will do this again. We will definitely do this again. So, Lindsay, I will follow up with you in terms of the Deep South Association, FemTech Association, and get your pearls of wisdom. And yeah, thank you so much. Now you get to go through your day because it's
that's right. That's right. Early morning. Thank you for having me, Fiona. And thank you everyone for listening. Really appreciate it. I hope to meet so many more people. So thank you, Fiona. I really appreciate it.
All right.